Well, hi there, folks. Welcome along to the AvPoint Theatre this morning. What we're looking to do in this morning's session is really just take you on a little bit of a journey. And this journey is really about business intelligence and how the whole new version of SQL Server called SQL Server Denali really starts to integrate with what we've got today with SharePoint 2010. So my name is Peter Ward. I'm the Chief Technical Architect for Wardy IT Solutions. And on stage here also is we have Sean Baggett, who's one of our business intelligence specialists with Wardy IT Solutions as well. So really what we wanted to do in today's session is if we think about data in our organisations, typically we think about those guys that are wearing brown pants. So the guys in accounts, the guys in finance. But what we want to do in today's session is show you how we can go and start to make data sexy. So really start to light up all of the data that we have inside of our organisations. Because if you think about what data actually is data is really the second most important asset behind people that an organisation has. It provides strategic value as well as allows organisations to differentiate from other organisations in that particular sector. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to be looking at what's called CTP3, so Community Technology Preview 3, and this is the first public look around the product that's known as Crescent. And we're going to take you on that journey today and show you exactly how that works together. So where we're going to start this morning is we're just going to give you a little bit of an overview of what business intelligence is, and then we're going to take you all the way from zero all the way through to hero. So what Sean's going to do in today's demonstration is been recently working on a project with financial data. So what that's going to do is we've pulled data from a number of different stock exchanges around the world, and then we're actually aggregating that and allowing an interactive view that we can really start to go and provide to all of the people inside of our organisations. So it's not just an IT tool, it's really designed as something that we can actually disseminate for stakeholders internal to our organisation, but also to stakeholders external to our organisation as well. But before we get started, probably the best place to start is really to define what is business intelligence. So folks, does anyone want to share with me what business intelligence means to them or what business intelligence means to their own organisation? Anyone want to maybe quick show of hands what it means to you? Well, really, if you think about it, and this is typically when I ask the question exactly what I expect, is silence. Because if you look at what we've got on the screen, it's really this oxymoron. The whole concept of business and intelligence really don't go together. But if we think about what business intelligence is business intelligence is really the knowledge that we derive from our data in order to go and affect a more positive outcome. And when we're talking about positive outcomes, what do you think that is that we're talking about? Well, we're particularly talking about profitability. How do we actually go and increase our prices or increase revenue, but actually then drive down costs? Because that's what profit really is, and that's what we're really trying to derive out of this. Now, you might be looking at me going, look, I'm a government organisation or I'm a non-for-profit, so what does it mean to me? But really, it's the whole concept of how do we go about doing more with less? And I think a great example of that is Coca-Cola Amatil. So Coca-Cola Amatil has the distribution rights for Coca-Cola within Australia. And if you look on the back of any of their vending machines today, you'll see that they've got a little wireless antenna. Now that wireless antenna is so important for the entire supply chain, because not only does it actually collect the information about what you bought, was it a bottle of Mount Franklin water, was it a Coke, was it a Diet Coke, what it is, collects the time of the day that you purchased it, how is it that you paid for it, did you go and use the SMS technology to pay for it, or alternatively did you actually use your card to swipe through, or did you just go and traditionally pop the coins in there? But what it also does, that little wireless antenna, is it also goes and records temperature data as well. So both ambient temperature as well as humidity. Because if you think about the whole process of going and stocking a Coke vending machine, it's a very laborious process. We need to put somebody in a truck, that truck needs to drive to a warehouse, somebody needs to be on a forklift to go and load that truck up, that truck needs to then go and drive out to the machine and then restock the machine. So it's a very expensive process in order to do that. So what they can do now is we can actually now start to forecast with temperature information. But the key thing is with that technology is that typically that was very restrictive inside of an organisation. It was only really available to analysts. What we want to do is actually broaden that and make that available across a number of stakeholders inside of the organisation. Because if you think about it, IT doesn't understand the business realistically. All of a sudden, the business starts to talk in terms about net present value. I want to report on X or Y. As IT, we're great at bits, basically. So we're great at keeping the telephony system up with Link. We're great with keeping the servers and the backups happening. But we just don't have that deep, rich business understanding in order to be able to assist the business. And if you think about the way that reporting traditionally happens inside of an organisation, IT is often the bottleneck around that. So in the previous release of SQL Server 2008 R2, we introduced a new technology known as Power Pivot. Now, Power Pivot was designed to leverage existing skills in an organisation, because what do you think is the most widely used BI tool in the world today? Microsoft Excel. So why do we want to go and utilise a different technology set? We can bring somebody into our organisation, we know that they've got Excel skills, rather than trying to teach them a new tool, let's go and leverage that. So we can go and use Excel services to go and deliver that directly out of SharePoint 2010. And we've also got a Power Pivot library directly in 2010 today that allows us to then go and have this concept of a single version of the truth. And I think the most powerful example of how we can go and use Power Pivot is with one of our customers. So one of our customers actually works in the furniture manufacturing and wholesaling industry. And the CFO was actually just missed a flight down in Sydney recently. So he's walking through the airport and picked up BRW magazine. And he went to where we all go and do our thinking. He went to the throne. So here he was sitting down reading BRW magazine in the bathroom. And all of a sudden he had this light bulb moment. Now, this light bulb moment was, I wonder if there's some correlation between interest rates and the sale of my furniture. Now, that's pretty obvious. We would think that, yeah, there's going to be a correlation. But it actually wasn't interest rates that was actually affecting furniture sales. It was actually new house constructions. So as interest rates go up, what do you think happens to new house construction? Yeah, typically it goes down, because normally as interest rates drop, new house construction increases. But the new house construction is typically in those emerging mortgage belts, so on the fringes of our existing communities. So what we see is like the large package furniture, 700 pieces of furniture for $900, those sales were going skyrocketing. But correspondingly, what he was able to go and do is he was then also able to go and see that as interest rates rose, what do you think happened to furniture sales? Well, you'd think they'd decrease. Well, they did, but the most profitable items that they stocked, which was the $14,000 leather sofa, all of a sudden started to increase because there was more sentiment in the marketplace and there was a lot more confidence about purchases. So all of a sudden, people that had money in the bank were getting higher returns. But the reason that this was leveraged and able to be enabled is that all of a sudden, they could go and create a data mashup. Because in a traditional reporting and data warehouse scenario, we don't go and store information such as temperature data or interest rates. It allows us to go and take data that's structured out of existing reporting systems and overlay that with unstructured data in order for us to then go and come up with a solution. Because often what reporting in BI is it's really the analysis and allowing somebody to go and do ad hoc what-if scenario. I wonder what happens if I do this. And I want to only do it once. So hence the reason as IT, and what we want to do is start to push that back down onto an end user so that they can start to actually leverage that rather than IT using that. And I think a great example of that is the next slide that we've got, if we think about reporting. So any organisation, we've got this whole concept of what we call the reporting life cycle, because really it's a maturity journey that any organisation goes on. We start with our operational or canned report. So these are the static reports. But if I go and provide somebody a static report today, what's one of the things they're going to ask me? Well, typically, and the word that I'm always listening for when I'm working with a customer is, can I export it to Excel? Why is exporting it to Excel so important? Because all of a sudden it means they're no longer operationally focused. All of a sudden they've moved across into the analytics space. Now that analytics might be as simple as putting a chart over the information to go see trends over time, or it might be a more complex scenario similar to what we described before with interest rates. So being able to pull in ABS data or statistics around demographics to overlay against our existing data. So for example, Fleetwood Mac, who basically haven't had a number one album since the 70s, all of a sudden they're on the top 10 albums of iTunes. Why? Well, as a retailer, I'd want to know that, because I want to know why all of a sudden there's this trend. So for anyone that's a Glee fan, it's because Fleetwood Mac actually were recently featured inside of Glee. But you'll also see that across different things, like all of a sudden pumped shoes. Like at the moment, the current trend is that blue pumped shoes are selling. Why? Well, all of a sudden it was on the magazine. So as a retailer or any organisation, I want to be able to draw these correlations, and that's why I want to empower my end user. But realistically, where we want to do it and what Crescent starts to empower with us with the next release of SQL Server tying in with SharePoint is this whole concept of we move around the maturity cycle to what we call forecasting. Because if we think about what traditional reporting is traditional reporting is basically decided I'm going to drive to Brisbane, but in order to get to Brisbane, I'm going to look in my rear vision mirror because I'm actually looking at where I've come from, not where I'm going. And that's what forecasting allows us to do, is say, this is what I want to do, and I want to be able to then monitor and measure that as we walk through the reporting life cycle. Now, Crescent is really a paradigm shift that we have in our reporting tool set today. Because if you think about who are the biggest users of data inside of our organisations, they're typically at that executive level, the CEO or the CFO. So you might be surprised, but what do you think is the most common tool that a CEO or CFO uses to communicate internally and externally to the organisation? What do you think the most common tool for communication is? Yeah, email. And apart from that, it's in the office. If it's in the office suite, it's actually PowerPoint. And you might be very surprised about that whole concept, because if you think about what an executive needs to do, they need to go and communicate a message to a number of different stakeholders. Now, they might be communicating directly to financiers because they're looking to actually raise additional capital. It might be shareholders that they need to go and present this information to, or it might be that they're actually trying to communicate the internal strategy about what's driving that organisation. So the whole concept behind Microsoft Crescent and Project Crescent, which we see in Denali, is really how do we actually enable that whole concept of a dashboard report. So the same way that inside of the PowerPoint deck that you see here, I can go and drag a chart in, I can also go and add textual information and annotation. That's the whole concept behind Crescent, is how do I bring data from a number of different sources and effectively storyboard reporting. But where it starts to get really exciting, and Sean will show us this a little bit later, is that we've got the interactivity that's available directly inside of here. So traditionally, if you think about a report, the report might have a great bar chart that's sitting on there. All of a sudden, the business has decided that, hey, that bar chart, I'd love it to be a pie chart. So what does the business do? They go and raise a help desk ticket. That help desk ticket sits in a queue. All of a sudden, we need to go and assign a business analyst to it to scope that out. The BA goes and scopes it out. We need to go and appoint a project manager. Once this is all done, it's 6 months down the track before the business has got this. All of a sudden now with Project Crescent, I can right-click directly on a chart and I can go and change how that chart looks. So I can go and change that from a bar directly to a pie chart. Looks like we have a couple of... What Sean's going to now show us in directly out of 6.10.
Good morning, everyone. Is this microphone working? Hello? Yes? Good morning. As Peter's already introduced for you there, what we're going to quickly do today, well, we need to change the screen. Hopefully we get that back up. Should I go on one? D. Alright, so what we're going to be doing is creating a tabular mode analysis services database, which I've already got the instance created here on our SharePoint named instance, using the BI semantic model, the new paradigm that Microsoft's going towards. And this is where we're going to be deploying our database to. Now, the first thing we need to do to actually do this is actually in the new Business Intelligence Design Studio. This is actually a variation on that, which is using Project Juno, and it's just as straightforward as going a new project, and we select this analysis services tabular model business intelligence type environment here, give it a quick name, we go OK, it goes and creates all the background information it needs to do for the metadata. And you see that basically our project consists of one project file and one model file, essentially. And that's pretty much what you get. You have one model per project. If you want to have a different database to deploy, you actually have to create a second project. Now over on our designer over here, which is where we're actually going to now start creating our the actual tables that we're going to be linking to. And to do that, we go under our model menu here. We're going to be importing from a data source. And our data source is actually a standard relational database, which is, as Peter pointed out earlier, stock data from various exchanges around the world, from information going back to the beginning of the year, essentially. So we'll select our SQL Server and it's called SharePoint, which is a VM server I have running, and we're selecting the Accelerate BI database on that. We add a user account and password, which is used by the analysis services database to actually get the data and reprocess when you need to. And that's retained once you deploy the actual cube. What we'll be doing here is you can choose to actually select directly from tables, but for that demonstration purposes today I'll be using queries because we need to subset it a little bit. And I have these in the trusty notepad file. So we'll go and create these here, our query name here, we'll call price, paste in our query, validate it, and finish. And you'll see that's actually gone accessing my server virtual machine. It's retrieving rows dynamically as we speak. So our model now for this particular table has just under 900,000 rows on it. We close that and you can see that this is essentially our first table, which is the stock prices for various stocks around the world. We can start to tidy this up by going to symbol ID, because this is essentially going to be a relational key. We can hide that from our client tool, which is essentially the same thing as what would be a pivot table field list. We can also do the same for the date ID. Now these become our measures, so we can actually group select these, and we'll summarise these by maximum. And we're going to format these as currency, if I get it right. That's better. And for the volume measure as well, we also want to summarise that by maximum. That's going to be formatted as whole number, and we'll show thousands. And that's essentially our first table designed there. We'll quickly go through and add two more, which we can now go via using existing connections as opposed to import from data source, because we've got our data source already available. We open that again. We're going to be grabbing the next query we need here, which is history, which is essentially our date dimension. Paste in our query, validate. That's good. Only got 60 rows because we're just retrieving a subset of the date data, essentially the last 60 days. I'm going to hide our key field here, and what we also need to do is basically tell the model that this is our date table. So we mark it as the date table, and it gives you the list of available fields, but will default to the one that in this case is the only actual date value format. Select OK on that. And our last table that we need to add is a bit more complex, and this is the one that actually pulls back the essentially the ticker symbols from all the various exchanges. Paste that in. A little bit more complex query, so it's taking a bit longer, but we've got roughly 15,000 rows. And again, we can hide our key field here, and what we can do also is with these renaming these fields up here, you've got various options to do that. You can rename using the context menu. If you select the column, you can go over to the properties tab window, update them there, and again you can do like double click in the field itself. And this column here I'll actually also format as a currency. The last thing we need to do to establish our model is establish the relationships between them. So we switch over to the diagram mode view, and you can see that we can scale things out a bit, and we just essentially draw our lines to establish the foreign key relationships. It's fairly dynamic, real-time linking up, and it doesn't matter which order you actually drag them around in, it'll actually work out which is the parent, which is the child in those relationships. If you hover your mouse over these joins now, you can see that it's actually highlighting which tables and which fields or which tables is actually involved in the relationship. So given that, That's our model built. We can now just go right click on the project and deploy. It's deployed. Now it's essentially processing the new database on the analysis services instance on my server VM. Again, taking a little bit of a while. There we go. So if we actually click over to our SharePoint instance here and refresh our database list, this BISM, that's the one we just created. And that's as quick as that. So given that, what we now need to do is create a Crescent report using this as our data source. For that we switch into SharePoint. Requires 2010 Service Pack 1 at this stage, and various other installation bits which I hope will be a lot easier to set up than this one was from the Microsoft release level of this. So the first thing we need to do is create what's called a new BISM connection file. And that's essentially what everyone gets used to as I guess you call it a connection string. And you give it the server name in the instance and the database, and we go OK. And that's our new connection. Basically, then we now can click on our drop down, and we now have this option here, create a Crescent report. Launch this, and our Silverlight environment fires up, and you can see we have our 3 primary tables there, including the lowercase h, which I didn't type in properly. And we can quickly go through and start creating a report. Now, all these little objects we actually create here are fully resizable if you can grab them with the handles on them and things like that. And the way it works is also to add new fields. You essentially click on the design surface, so nothing is selected. You then go through to your actual tables you've got available here, and you just start clicking them and they'll add dynamically, and it's creating a table for me on the fly. So I can now go through and select a few more of these. The last close price and the last close date. And you can do drag and drop type formatting. You'll see that it's smart enough, Silverlight won't let any objects overlap. And if you resize it, if you can grab the handle, and that essentially becomes our first table, which will be context sensitive with the other charts I'm about to add, which I'll do again quickly here. We're going to be creating we want the symbol, and I'll also be grabbing the close price, and we'll need to get a bit more real estate here. And it will default to essentially table mode, but you'll see we have all these selections up the top here, and I'm going to change this one to a line graph. And I'll be changing some of the field orders here. I want to have the symbols on as my series, and I'm going to add a date axis. The data it's retrieving is actually real time. It's actually going out and querying it from the actual BI database that we just deployed, but you can see that it does get a bit busy with getting these warnings here with too many symbol values and things like that. That's one of the main reasons I've subsetted some of the data, but you will also quickly manage to clear that up. I'm going to be dropping the title field there because it takes up a bit too much space, and I'm going to change my legend to be on the right. Now the last chart I'm going to add starts again in the same manner. You just click on your fields. Where'd that go? Okay, it's managed to put it over here. So it's the trouble when you're working on a smaller screen size, it gets a bit lost. So if I pull that over there a bit, we scroll down, and this is over to the left. I also want to have a closing price measure. This I'm going to create as a scatter graph. Let's pull out the size a bit. Now for this one, I also want to move things around a bit. I'll leave the detail as a symbol. My max of close, I'm going to choose down to the Y value there. And I'm going to add the volume measure as the X value. Once it catches up. And our date, I'm going to put on what's called the play axis. It's going and getting the data it needs for this chart. It works much faster on my home machine, which is quad core, 16 gig of RAM, so my apologies for the slight delays. Alright, and for this one we'll also drop the chart title because it's taking up space we don't really need. And again, we've got too many filter values, as you can see here. So what we can do then is essentially add what's called filters to the filter area. And that just gives you a drag and drop type area where you can essentially go, I'm going to select my exchange name as one level of filtering, the symbol as a second level of filtering, and I'll also add my calendar year month. Yep. So by clicking on these, you can actually see that it gives you the actual available values by the grouping and the actual physical counts for them. Now if we'll scroll over to the side a little bit here so we can try and see what's happening again. We click on the Australian Stock Exchange one. It actually goes back and requeries the database and it does real-time filtering. It says I only want to get the stocks related from the ASX. Eventually. There we go. Now I wanted to add another second level of filtering here. You actually got an advanced filter mode here. You can actually click on this and it does some nice funky graphics which switches it around and allows me to go, I want to select stocks that start with, say, Wes for Wes farmers. I apply that filter and our data set becomes instantly a lot more usable. We go actually screen size to maximise it a bit, and we can see that what we've got available here now is an interactive environment with our two symbols we have available here. I'll actually want to quickly go back and add our data points to that chart. We add those above the line there and now we can see which actual symbol represents which stock measure. Then with the play axis gives us funky little options where we can actually see real-time mapping of the information as it goes through. We can stop that, drag it back and forth. If we click on a single one of the objects we have available, the first thing it does, it filters out the table on the top here, as well as the line chart below as well. We can then still scrub through the actual data we have available. And if you mouse over any of these data points, you can see that we actually get the point in time values for that information. Click on the white space and it returns back to normal. One thing that may be hard to pick up, but around where my mouse is, you can see the dates actually ticking over in the background as it's actually hitting that data point. And so if you also then wanted to do further filtering, you can click on the I only want to get data from August or June and August. So actually you'll see here now that essentially what's going on is my dates will actually, there's no July data. That's pretty much it. That's a quick run through from the building a data model, then deploying it to a analysis services database, and quickly building a Crescent report on it that helps you out.
So folks, what we've got here is obviously something you can actually play with today. CTP3 is actually out, coupled with SharePoint 2010 Service Pack 1. So folks, hopefully we've gone and shown you some of the exciting features that are available in Crescent. So does anybody have any questions about what we saw today before we look to wrap up? You will get these bits, yes. It's a little bit at the moment, a little bit, a couple of other steps, believe it or not, it's not just next.
The data that when you set the model up, you imported the data when you were setting the model up, does that data keep being refreshed and imported, or do you need an SSIS package to keep the data up to date?
Yes, the question is basically where's the data coming from, and for our examples here, there is a background SSIS package which goes and FTPs the data daily from a website that we subscribe to, and to get that.
So when you did the import,
Data was already had been imported previously into the data warehouse.
So folks, once again, thank you very much for your time this morning. I hope you got something out of the session. If you've got any more questions, feel free to pop up after the answer, guys. Thanks a lot. Hope you enjoy your rest of the day.
Yes, enjoy yourselves.